Welcome back after lunch. We are well fed and ready to go here. I'm Rachel Bergman, as Deecha just said, GM of North America for Mo Engage. And why don't you guys both introduce yourself? Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie Lay. I'm the Senior Director of Retention at Poshmark. I've been at Poshmark about a year as we're starting a retention journey.
Hey guys, my name is Aziz Vahora. I'm a Director for Growth Data Engineering. I've been with Poshmark for about 2.5 years, so kind of glad to have Katie here along with the journey.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a lot about that as we go on here. But in meeting the two of you, one thing that really struck me, and I think something that actually Ravi mentioned a little bit earlier, is that one of the really, fairly unique things about your business, I think, is the fact that you are a bi-directional marketplace. I think that really does lead to a lot of very kind of interesting things that you can do with journeys, because you are really looking at both sides of that. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that, Katie?
Yeah, I don't know how familiar you guys are all with Poshmark. It is a secondhand
Any
reseller.
Poshers out here?
Yeah, any Poshers? Oh,
Wow.
A lot of you, that's great. It's a secondhand reseller which has both buyers and sellers. So we don't actually maintain inventory. What we're doing is facilitating sellers reaching out to a much larger customer base than they would normally. And one of the things that's really interesting about that, and versus other places I've worked, is that we don't maintain our inventory. We maintain the relationship with the sellers and with the buyers. So my job is to get not just buyers in the door, which is what a lot of us have done in our past with retail experience. I have to get the sellers in the door. I have to get sellers to cross that journey to become buyers, buyers to become sellers. And so it's really important that not only do we have to think about single journeys, we have to think about what that journey looks like based on whether or not you've listed an item before, whether or not you are selling, whether or not you are buying. Have you done both? And how does that change based on what you've done? So it really changes the way that I have thought about this in my previous career.
So to add to that, because we are a two-sided marketplace and we actually don't hold any inventory, it actually brings unique challenges when it comes to data. Especially if you think about inventory, a single exact item could be on sale by multiple people. So how do we identify those things? How does those data points become available for Katie's team to be able to market on it? Also, identifying unique characteristics of each of the customer groups that we have, whether they are Poshers who are here to buy or Poshers who are here to sell. And identifying those journeys, those data points, that's where my data engineering team comes in play.
I think one of the interesting things that we talked about too is that your buyers are maybe your most important segment, but the sellers are the ones that you have to really engage with and make sure that they create that community that the buyers want to buy from, right? So it's interesting to think about how one might be more important to you in terms of your business and the dollars, but the other side is important to create that community that brings in the dollars, right?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about it is not only are we building journeys and not only are we building these relationships, because we don't have a business without our sellers, we have to think about our sellers as my core customer and Aziz's core customer. Whereas if you were looking at it from an external perspective, the buyers are the people that everyone's looking for. So we have to make sure that our sellers are happy with the features that we're developing, with the engagement tools that we're developing, and that they are getting the tools to engage their customers through our experience, and we're having to enable all of that.
Yeah, but to add to this, the way we try to enable these things is Poshmark is not just a two-sided marketplace, it's actually a social marketplace. And the social aspect was introduced to allow sellers to have a way to identify who are the interested buyer for their products. So when you have a closet on Poshmark and items are listed, those items, the buyers who are coming to Poshmark can actually follow your closet. They can like an item that you might have listed. They can share the item you might have. They can comment on it. That allows for the seller to identify who are the interested buyer, what kind of thing they're looking for that they're liking. So enabling those kind of things is what makes social marketplace work for sellers.
Yeah, and I think, and when you talk about community, right? It's not just a buzzy word. That is what you are and who you are to your users, right? To the Poshers.
Correct. So the way we think about communities is look at it this way: merchandise is something that is available, but how do you style yourself? And those styles is what generates community. Some people who are into shoes and they love Air Jordan shoes, and that's a community of its own. Some people will live in a certain type of weather, that becomes a community of people who buy warm clothes, for example, in the cold weather. So we're looking to identify these kind of communities and enabling sellers, right, to be part of that community where they can find the like-minded buyers for their merchandises.
And how, like, thinking about your marketing programs and how you're driving that with programs. I mean, Katie, can you speak a little to that?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things for me, I had worked at Amazon and Expedia before. Those are very sort of unidirectional journeys for customers. When I came to Poshmark, the thing that I was having to realize is that not only are you having to enable these relationships between buyers and sellers, you're having to enable the journey of discovery for both buyers and sellers. So we have people who've been poshing for 12 years. They're super experienced. They know what it means when we're putting stuff in front of them. Then we have people who came in like 2 weeks ago because they're happening to look for a cool look for the Beyonce concert, or they are trying to track down something that they've been seeking for a really long time. And so we have to think about not just the journey, which in this case might be you listed something, I want you to actually put the best listing possible forward. I also have to think about how much you know about Poshmark at that moment in time. Do you know that we're a social marketplace, or did you find us via Google? Did you make sure that when you were going through the process of getting them to buy something, that you gave them information about how to sell when they're done with it? So we have to really think about this sort of bi-directional discovery journey as well as these unidirectional journeys. And that is something that I think is really unique in the way that we're putting these things together, and means that we have to have an incredibly flexible system that can layer on a couple of different user states at once at the same time that you're also trying to get these really common marketing messages out the door. And that means that Aziz and his data team have a lot of work to do, which is why you see us together. We're kind of joined at the hip at work too.
Yeah, pretty much just like here. We're sitting together, we're working together. Ideas come out from actually engineering side. There's a lot of ideas come out for Journey because we see the data firsthand of how it ties different customers together and how we can easily segment those customers. So it's really a great relationship because the marketplace is such complex and nuances are so much nuances there that the cleanliness of data really plays a big role in making those journeys possible.
Yeah, let's talk about your relationship a little bit. We didn't really talk about that as much, I think, when we were preparing for this, but it is, like you said, I mean, you're the way that you can tell that you work together, that it's not like data over here, marketing over here. Like, is that a conscious effort at Poshmark, do you think, or did you just find each other? Like, how did that end up happening?
That's very interesting. Earlier, Deepak mentioned something about silos within the teams and how each team has their own processes and standard and the way of doing things. Poshmark is not that different from those kind of things because we are in the midway of our journey, right? We've been a company for 12 years, so we've been public, we've been bought out. So obviously there is a lot of different things that went in between. So the way this became a relationship for us is having learned that from actually, believe it or not, Deepak, myself, I knew that there had to be a team that helps drive this from the data perspective. And when Katie joined, this is why I said earlier, I'm so glad that she actually joined, because I had a partner on the other side that I can work with that understood what I was trying to bring to the table and why I was trying to make those efforts. And somebody was actually able to take this and actually make it actionable, right? I could have the best data in the world, but if somebody can't make it actionable, it doesn't work. And I think that's why our relationship works, is we found commonality and common interest toward a goal.
Yeah, I think, and this is particularly important when you're beginning this journey for all these kind of experiences we're dealing with, you have to be really intentional about building these kind of cross-functional relationships. I mean, Aziz and I have both done this in a few different places. And one of the things that I have always found is that marketing's job is to frame the problem, not the solution, and to frame the outcome that you want rather than the way that you want to have it done. So for example, I go in and I say, Aziz, I need to be able to get these customers in this time frame using these characteristics, and I'm going to be using it in these 3 ways that I can think of. I'm sure you can also think of additional ones. Let's work together to figure out what I actually need. And then he'll come back with solutions, and we can talk about the pros and cons of them. But what I had found, and I was totally guilty of this early in my career, is I would go in with a solution, and I'd say, I need this particular thing, and I need you to deliver it now. And then 1, I would get exactly what I asked for, and rarely was it as good as what I had in my head. And 2, when you are going through that process, you have to build flexibility into it. And when I was asking for things very specifically, there was no flexibility. So there's no test and learn, there's no experimentation, and there's no really input from other functions that see things that marketing doesn't. And that's one of the things that Aziz and I have developed a relationship because we've done this in a lot of places, and we've learned how to work well, both within our function and then cross-functionally. And then Aziz is just great to work with. So,
Thank you, Katie. It's more of we learned what not to do, so we're trying to do what we know we could do good.
Well, plenty of people do that and still don't actually get it done. So that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I mean, this leads very well into our next topic, kind of about like the future and what we see and like what's next for Poshmark, but also just like the industry and where we see things going. And a lot of things that you just said are gonna work perfectly with that, which is nice. But where do you see the evolution of engagement? I mean, both with like actual tooling and technology, but like, what are you excited about in terms of like what you're going to be able to do with these journeys, with what's here and what's coming in terms of tech?
I can start off. Obviously, Gen AI is a big thing these days, right? So I'll start off with saying, yes, Poshmark is also looking into it and, obviously investing in some Gen AI type of technology. One of the examples of thing that we enabled is if you go to Poshmark and use the app, there is a new AI feature that we enabled, which is basically allowing users to take a picture of something and let that picture do the search for you, instead of traditionally you having to type saying, hey, I'm looking for a shoes that has this color and this pattern. Like, imagine having to type that and actually trying to find something that's alike versus just take a picture, or somebody's walking down the street and you like the purse they're carrying, take a picture of that purse, and all of a sudden you can find the exact same item. So Poshmark is definitely looking into this, but we're taking an approach where we want to make sure whatever we end up using, right, actually enables our Poshers to make whatever they're doing in the app, make it easy to do. So it should feel like a natural thing, not something that was added onto the top. So that's the approach we're going with.
yeah, there's a few things. Generative AI is, of course, a huge buzzword right now. One of the things that I think about generative AI in general is it's really good at doing things that people have done before. So it helps you create steps, that helps you think through like very basic kind of copy, that kind of stuff. What I think that we're getting caught up in the shiny things when we're focusing on that. I think about generative AI as how can I use this to eliminate steps? How can I use this to get to the point where I can actually bring something unique and different to the table? Poshmark is a unique marketplace. It's not going to have everything covered when we use something that is taking from things that have existed in the past. And so one of the things we're really thinking about, Aziz just talked about Posh Lens, which is one of the features that we're talking about. Posh Lens is really great at helping people find things. But when I'm thinking about listers or people who are trying to sell things, it's also really good at describing things.
Correct.
And describing things consistently in a way that means that we can then actually find things for Aziz's team in a consistent way. It takes a lot of work off of our Poshers, so they are having to do less heavy lifting, which makes it a lot easier to use the service. That's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about a lot. How do I skip the steps that are challenging, use generative AI to help with those things, and then come back in and partner with whatever comes out from AI to make it unique to us and unique to our brand, unique to our experience, but also really kind of helps you leap instead of actually having to kind of plod through all the steps we've been doing before. So that's one of the things that we're really focusing on as a team right now.
So to add to that, for part of how we enable some of these things, right, one of the key components that comes to mind when working with Gen AI is the data. And when it comes to data, it's actually the hygiene and the cleanliness of data, which is the most important step for any AI solution. And part of the hygiene is some of the things that you want to do before you embark on your AI journeys. Really understand your data. Make sure that data is clean. What I mean by clean is make sure that you had a chance to actually process the data, standardize the data. And if you standardize the data, it allows for your AI to actually process the data very easily, cost effectively, and produce a consistent output. And when an output is produced, it's actually with high confidence. And not only that it has high confidence, you can actually trace back, because your data is clean, to understand how it got to that answer, right? Another thing that you want to make sure as part of the cleanliness is removing all the bias. So if you make data standard and clean, it removes bias from the data, so the machine AI is not learning bias that you put into the data. And another big factor that comes to mind when you work with this is that you have to always ensure is privacy. User privacy is key. So when you go through this cleanliness process, removing any sensitive information, any user identifiable information out of the process, so it actually creates a model that's based on the fact and the true data, and not any garbage that you put in, because otherwise garbage in, garbage out concept.
It's also consistency. I mean, I'm wearing Poshmark shoes. I got these on our marketplace. Would you describe these as gray shoes or purple shoes? And in which order would you describe them? That's the kind of thing that really helps and builds better models when we have all of these things consistently, the hygiene's applied ahead of time, and it really just helps everyone get better results longer term.
But so consistency is good, right? But what's also good, I've learned from you, is randomness. So I think that's one of the really interesting things about being a posher myself, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, is that it's not always about the recommendation being perfect based on what I've done before, but actually allowing me to discover something. So I know that's a huge part of what you're thinking about with the journey.
Yeah, I'll take this one because this is a story that's really near and dear to my heart. When I first started in my digital marketing career, I was at Amazon Video, and I had a product. He became a VP eventually. He was a director when we started. I had a product director. All his recommendations were 1950s black and white movies because he loved 1950s black and white movies. But that's not what you're going to sit down and always watch with your family, right? Occasionally, you're going to want to sit down with your kid, and your kid does not want to watch film noir, quite frankly. And so what we really thought about introducing there and continue to think about introducing here is how do you add discovery as well as the consistent recommendations? You want great recommendations, but a 95% recommendation rate may not be best for your company. It may be better to get 90-ish% right, and the other 10% is completely random, so you can learn new things and not set it up so that you're only getting beaded 1920s gowns or stuff that you would wear to a concert this weekend. I mean, sometimes I need to actually buy jeans too. So you have to introduce randomness intentionally so that you can get additional data and you're constantly feeding your algorithms so that you don't drive people into seeing you as a very niche area for them as opposed to something that you would go to all the time.
I mean, that is an interesting data challenge.
Correct, it is, and it's basically when we have to deal with this kind of thing, that's where the A/B testing comes in play big time, right? Is how many percent of people you're going to introduce this perfect hyper-personalized journey versus partially personalized, but there is some randomness, and then seeing the effectiveness of the two to see how it works out, right? So yeah, data challenge definitely, and it's mixing what hyper-personalization gave you with randomness that you want to introduce based on some other variables of that user.
And it drives new segments too, longer term.
And that's why, I mean, I think, would you describe yourself as being in like an experimentation phase with thinking about AI right now? Or like, where do you think you are in your journey?
We are certainly in experimental phase. There is no doubt. There is so many possibilities that exist, no doubt, especially with the type of marketplace that we are. It's just that, like I said earlier, what makes this, introduction of whatever AI tool that we want to add, how will it help our end, users? And that's the key. How does it change their journey that makes it easy or removes a step from their journey, like the past lens, which is a search, right? How can we now reuse this same AI to actually help seller create a new listing if possible? Why can't they just take a picture of an item and out comes every piece of information about that item based on that picture? So creating that item for sale makes it very easy. So we are definitely in the experimental phase, and there's a lot of other possibilities there.
I don't think anyone should ever leave the experimental phase. Like,
Yeah.
whatever is going to be working 2 years from now is not going to work 3 years from now. So we need to constantly be thinking about how do we change and evolve our business.
Yeah, it does feel like this is the first time in a while where we can really say that, though. Like, it did feel like, come on, there were probably like 10 years there where I felt like we were having kind of like the same conversation over and over again. And this does feel new. I mean, just listening to Ravi earlier talk about like, just posing a question and then having your segment built for you or your journey built for you. I mean, those are, I don't really think my brain was working that way, like even 6 months ago. And now it actually feels possible. So.
I think it's possible, but I also think you have to instill the discipline in yourself and your team to not ask that question once. You have to ask that question every 6 to 12 months because, like we've said, generative AI is great at giving you things that already exist, but those things are going to evolve, and so you have to have the discipline to constantly rethink what you're doing in a structured way. Sometimes you'll ask the question, you'll get the same answer for 2 years in a row, and then it'll be the same, but then the next time you ask, it's completely different because someone has done something new and something different. So it's always worth keeping your eye on what's going on, your pulse on what's going on in the marketplace.
I mean, I think you're describing perfectly how, like, AI can seem a little scary, I think, to some marketers, right? For a lot of reasons. I mean, there's obviously like the, could be like impacting my job issue, and then there are all the user issues and everything that flows down from there, right? But I think what you're saying is that no matter what the data and the tech is going to do, there's still going to have to be so much thought put into, and maybe like even better thought and like more interesting thought put into the journey.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think it'll be fun. I think we all got into this because we like understanding what's going on in the world. We like some level of prediction about what's going on in the world and how people are going to behave. And then suddenly our predictions are going to get less good at predicting, or they're going to get even better at predicting, but you are only going to have it work for a few months. Because, in this space, you have to talk to people and evolve conversations. I mean, I talk to my kids, for example, and even the slang that they use is changing like minute
Every
to minute.
day. Yeah.
So when I look at the
Thank you,
generative
TikTok.
AI stuff, and I'm like, yay, I can talk like a Gen Z person. And I'm like, oh, but my Gen A kid won't even know what I'm saying in 3 years. So you have to kind of keep an eye on the pulse and change, but use the tools to help you accelerate faster.
No, I think one thing for sure about the journey, I'll give an example of my own journey. I started out working in data back in like late 90s, literally. Once I got this one job of, writing reports for this one small company. And that time I knew that I want to work in data, and I kind of understood the importance of it. The databases that we were using at the time, from there to the OLTP type of database that came around, which was the next big thing. From there to the big data that came around, which became the big thing. Then came the data lakes and data oceans, and now came the AI. So this journey, it's just ever evolving. So it's really exciting having lived through those journeys and having all the possibilities that I've seen that it went through. AI is literally like an infant right now, if you think about it, for the industry. So it'll be interesting to see how it grows,
I can't wait. So we just have a couple minutes left. And Katie, I did want to ask you, I know you said you've been with Poshmark just over a year, right? And as I understand it, you may have a brand new title at Poshmark too, right?
Yes, so my job did not exist a year ago. I'm a senior director of retention marketing specifically, and that's because prior to COVID, Poshmark had just really amazing retention on its own. Like it was organically a company that brought people back repeatedly, and that's partly the social experience, that's partly the ease of use, and it's partly our revenue structure for people who are selling. But what any startup goes through is they have these great customers, and then there's customers who stick with them. But once you start to accelerate and grow, you're getting to people who are going to be less easily convinced to change their current behavior. Because you are filling a specific need, and then you don't necessarily fill the need in the same way because needs evolve as your customer base grows. And so I was brought in to help build a retention organization, which didn't exist previously. And you can tell a little bit about that when you are kind of experiencing our Poshmark customer outreach right now. We're a little, I'd say, driven by engineering and product wanting to talk to you. Rather than someone taking a step back and saying, what do our customers want to hear from us? What do Poshers want to experience? And so that's something that we have been working on together, is how do we manage all of the needs within an organization to reach our customers across all of these touch points in a way that makes sense for our Poshers, not necessarily in a way that makes sense for our organization. So that is the journey that we've been on for the past year, and I think these journeys always last at least 2-3 years to begin with, and then you evolve again.
Absolutely. Anything else to?
No, I mean, just happy to actually have her on the team because that journey was a need, right? I got hired as a growth data engineering where primarily growth meant new user because Poshmark, like Katie said, was experiencing so much new user growth that was the function that got created. But within 1 year of working there, we knew that, we really need to now worry about retention as well, right? And that's when Katie joined, and it really created yet another need for the data that I was already processing. And in growth, you're processing data from all the different advertisers that you work with, the attribution partners that you work with, your internal data. But now that you got all this data, you understood what that customer is, how can we use it to actually, keep them here longer? And that's when the journey got started.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us. Poshmark is a Mo Engaged client, so just to be upfront about that. But I mean, it's exciting to hear about the journey of the brand and what you're doing with your Poshers. But really excited to see what's next. So the next time that we're up here, who knows when that will be, a year, 2 years. Anyway, it's going to be really fun to hear what happens with the journey. So thank you so much for sharing.